As part of our program, the next panel will address Mexico's experiences on the topic Evolution of Deficit Measures and Public Sector Obligations in Mexico between 1980 and 2022. To moderate this space, we have the Director of Public Sector Statistics at the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit, Francisco Javier Carrasco Zamora. Good afternoon. The presentation will be made by Mr. Felipe de Jesús Martínez Gallegos. He has a degree in economics by the Universidad Iberoamericana and has worked at the Ministry of Finance for a little bit more than 30 years in the area of generating public finance and debt statistics. He will give us the presentation today. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to the event. Today, we're going to talk about how we have been measuring the fiscal balance and public debt measures during the last 40 years in Mexico. We have always relied on a tool that allows us to compile and classify and group the financial operations carried out by the public sector with the rest of the sectors of the economy, which is called the timely statistics of public finances. The objective is to measure the financing needs of the public sector as well as the levels and structure of revenue and expenditures and financing. As a determinant of the public balance, net borrowing or financial requirements, which can be synonyms for this presentation, we have the revenues, expenditures, and their source of financing would be borrowing and the net use of available financial assets. The timely public finance statistics were born between 1978 and 1983 as an effort of the Ministry of Finance to have timely information for these administrative and accounting records to support the decision-making of the authorities, inform the Congress and the general public. Basically, they rely on the flow of funds from the Treasury of the Federation, in the information we had from the collection offices, and in the information we had in the public debt administration, and reports on the flow of funds of parastatal entities that were the most important at that time. This generated a time series of income, expenditure, financing, and debt balances for the federal government in each of the parastatal entities, and then you could generate budget reports or the same public finance statistics. These statistics have been strengthened as the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit has improved its processes between 1986 and 1994. The Integral Information System of Public Revenues and Expenditures was created and the sending of information was automated, which allows the integration and compatibility of the information demands of the globalized agencies and standardized reports for the ministries and parastatal entities, eliminating duplication of information requirements, as well as making available standardized, timely, and reliable information by electronic means for decision-making and reporting to Congress. In 2003, the integral system of federal financial administration came into operation, which automates the payment process of federal treasury. Also, a little further on, the single account comes in. Also, after the general law of governmental accounting, we can count on the accounting and budget system that allows us to know each month the federal public expenditure in different authorized, committed, accrued, and paid moments. And in 2016, the accounting information begins to be used to measure the balances of the net financial position of the public sector every quarter, and from 2020 monthly. The present timely public finance statistics of the central government are prepared with information from the records of the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit and through the integrated information system. Information from parastatal entities is captured. The federal government basically relies on the administrative records, which would be once again the Federal Financial Administration System, SECOP, REFER, which handles the collection part, the Public Debt Information System, the information in which we administer the participation of the federal entities, and now recently also the governmental accounting system. On the parastatal side, we receive information, cash flows, expenses, income, debt, available assets, and accounting. All this information is concentrated on the Secretariat servers, processed, and we have the products, which are basically internal reports, monthly and quarterly reports, the information we publish on the Secretariat web page, information we provide to the Banco de Mexico, INEGI, and international organizations. The statistics are prepared with two conceptual frameworks: federal budget reporting, which follows national practices, and public sector financial requirements, which are aligned with the coverage and classification of the Monetary Funds Government Finance Statistics Manual. In terms of institutional scope, in the central government sector, the federal budget includes the executive, legislative, and judicial branches and 8 autonomous entities. And in the social security sector, the Mexican Social Security Institute and the ISSSTE, which would be the social security for the state workers. As for public companies, it only includes Pemex and CFE. The financial requirements of the public sector include, in the central government, the budgetary parts plus 121 parastatal entities with governmental activity, and FONADIN, which is a body without an organic structure that administers the assets and liabilities of the road rescue of more or less 1986 or 87, and a fund to make credits and support certain infrastructure projects. On the Social Security side, the financial requirements additionally include the Institute for the Security of the Armed Forces and 68 parastatal entities with market activities, both financial and non-financial. Other aspects of the methodological framework of statistics is in the part of determinants and financing of the net lending or deficit. In the federal budget, revenues and expenses for the sale or acquisition of financial assets for policy purposes are recorded above the line. In other words, capital expenditure includes both the acquisition of non-financial assets and financial assets that we acquire for policy purposes. And in the public sector financial requirements part, all the financial assets are recorded below the line. Regarding debt, debt is presented in net terms, which would be equivalent to the gross debt minus financial assets available in the federal budget, and public sector financial requirements, which would be the gross debt minus total financial assets. Regarding the basis of recording, we have a modified cash basis of recording that includes certain transactions offsets between income, expenses, expenditure, financing in both methodologies. And the balances, we have them at nominal value in Mexico, which would be equivalent to face value in the Public Finance Statistics Manual, except for the CETES, which are at the placement value. As for classifications, those of the federal budget are national, and those of the public sector's financial requirements seek to align with the Public Financial Statistics Manual. The data is published in monthly reports to Congress in the quarter reports on the Secretary's webpage for both methodologies, and they are published monthly, 30 days after each month. We will now discuss how deficit measures and public sector obligations have evolved over time. We can practically identify 3 periods in which measurements has certain more or less common characteristics. From 1980 to 1999, we had a financial balance indicator that practically covers the public sector for the main parastatals, and we had a budgetary balance that covered the central sector plus some budgetary entities of parastatal under budgetary control, which were around 26. Spending was measured, as we said, including the purchase of assets for policy purposes. From 2000 to 2014, after the 1985 financial crisis, by some legal mandates, some operations are carried off a budget. So the measurement of public balance is practically based on the budget balance, including off-budget operations. From 2015 to date, we are changing a little the indicator of the financial requirements of public sector to measure it as the indicator that indicates the variation of the net financial position and the hedges of classifications. We try to make them those of the Manual of Public Finance Statistics. In the following graph, you can see in the blue line the financial balance, which had the widest coverage, and the budget balance, more or less how it behaved. This is very high in the first years from 1980 practically until the 90s. It is very low or almost in balance from 1991 to 2000. However, it should be noted that in this last period, some off-budget obligations were already developing. As for the public debt, we can see the increases in the debt and then how it decreases, and also how the debt is modified from gross debt to net debt, which began to be measured in this way as of 1990. In this next graph, we have the public balance, which we measure from the budget balance plus the off-budget operations, which were basically those associated with the bank bailout. The long-term financial projects scheme, several self-financing projects that, according to the public debt law, were mandated to be recorded in a deferred manner in the budget. That is, when they were amortized, not when they were spent. The thicker line tells us what the deficit measure was and what its gap was with the blue dotted line, which is the financial balance as seen above, and you can already see how the curve is shifting through the part of the deficit that we had off budget. Likewise, this measure was managed by removing non-recurring revenues in order to see the sustainability of the public balance sheet. Later on, around 2010, we tried to correct the measurement of development banking, because what we were recording was a net loan, and to correct it so that it would reflect the operating deficit plus the constitution of preventive reserves for credit risk. This was in recognition of the fact that the development banks were already generating reserves for contingencies, so with rules similar to those of commercial banks, and had high capitalization ratios. In the following graph, we can see more or less the evolution of two debts and how it looks once we correct for the development bank portion, because the development bank debt would practically become the net worth. From 2015 to date, the budget law is adjusted to align the measurement with the Public Finance Statistics Manual, as all the measurement of the financial assets is below the line in terms of institutional classifications. The yellow line shows us what was the behavior of the balance sheet, and it is compared with the information we have of part of the financial balance sheet that was measured at the beginning, at the financial requirements as they had been measured in the first occasion. In the following graph, we can see the debt balances, while they are around levels of 12 billion pesos or 13 billion pesos. The yellow line would be the balance or obligation associated with this debt, and the black line is the net financial position that is already giving us accounting results. As an additional element to this measure, in the part with the purple line, we put what the net financial position would look like if we included the labor liabilities of the main parastatal entities. Finally, we are going to mention the recommendations to strengthen the public finances statistics that we have from the last review made by the Monetary Fund on the codes and standards called RUST. And the first recommendation is to strengthen consistency among macroeconomic statistics for their harmonizing terminology, institutional coverage, sectorization, classification of transactions, assets and liabilities, valuation methods, and adjustments to the source data. This is a recommendation for the entire statistical system, especially for the balance of payments, national accounts, and public finance statistics. Specifically for the public finance statistics, we have three recommendations that stand out. Strengthening classifications so that they are even more in line with the fund manual, the recording of transactions on the accrual basis, and the recording of balances at the market value. They also recommend the creation of harmonized accounting standards and related catalogs to facilitate the collection of public finance statistics, as well as to improve the timelines and collection of information from state and municipalities. That's all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Felipe, for your presentation. Now we have some questions that we have received. Then let's move on to them. One of them is, what were Mexico's main challenges in the presentation of public finance statistics information? We still face many challenges. In order to adhere to the international manuals, on one hand, there what are the control variables that we have internally within the treasury and within the public sector as fiscal indicators for the control of public finances. Changing methodologies abruptly or including many fiscal indicators was something that we were very concerned with, because we already had certain national indicators that everyone somehow would understand, and having additional indicators generate a lot of uncertainty as to what the reaction was going to be, and that really hit us hard, especially between 2000 and 2010, because we always had a kind of over punishment from the markets after the 1985 crisis. Even after we have tried to align ourselves more closely with the public finance statistics manuals, part of the challenges we face are in the sources of information. I believe that to the extent that accounting becomes more aligned with other standards, it will be easier to align with the fund's public finance statistics, not only in the rankings, but also in the registration basis, both the transactions and the market valuation part. Thank you, Felipe. Another question would be, how and in what document do you present the debt that transcends one administration? Does its floating debt have a budgetary effect, or does your floating debt have a budgetary effect? We do have data on floating debt, that is to say, on public sector suppliers, basically. We have not had any debt defaults in many years, so we did not have any other type of arrears. And the only thing we basically have are suppliers that can be measured through the expenditure pending of payment. And in the part of prostatal entities, the accounting of each one of them shows the arrears in supplier payments. And in what documents are they presented? This could be seen in the public account and also in the audited financial statements of each of the prostatals. Another question would be, does Mexico's public debt include accounts payable from previous years and liabilities for employee benefits and social benefits? On the public debt side, basically, we include securities and loans. As we continue to measure the statistics in terms of cash flow, we're not entering the arrears or the accounts payable, although we do have the information as I had already mentioned. Okay, so basically those would be the questions. We thank you very much for your participation, Felipe. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, the president of FOCAL will then recognize the panelists for their outstanding participation in this 8th forum. Thank you very much.